What would you do if you woke up on a peaceful Saturday morning and found 17 SUVs parked neatly across your tomato field? No barbecue. No family reunion. Just your local HOA. Uninvited, unapologetic, and claiming your land as community overflow parking. That's exactly what happened to Alex Carter, a former tech engineer turned small-town farmer who just wanted a quiet life and a garden for his daughter. But when Margaret Wilson, the perfectly polished president of the Evergreen Meadows HOA, showed up with her clipboard and her fake charm, Alex realized something chilling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a land grab. What followed was a full-blown war, fought not with weapons, but with forged documents, trespassing SUVs, HOA corruption, and one surprising secret: the entire neighborhood's electricity. It ran through Alex's land. Throw in a suspicious power outage, a community meeting gone nuclear, and a little girl crying over her crushed tomato castle, and you got the kind of HOA story that feels too insane to be true. But it is true. Subscribe to Real HOA Drama right now for the full story, because when the HOA comes for the wrong farmer, they just might get plowed. Alex Carter wasn't the kind of guy who picked fights with his neighbors. He was the kind of guy who left Silicon Valley to grow tomatoes, who traded quarterly earnings reports for morning walks under open skies and the sound of birds instead of boardrooms. His life goal? Peace, dirt under his nails, and enough quiet to hear his thoughts again. That's why, on a Saturday morning that promised nothing more dramatic than a cup of black coffee and a fresh bloom on the tomato vines, Alex didn't expect to be jolted out of bed by the unmistakable sound of an internal combustion engine, and then another, and another, and another. It wasn't thunder rolling in from the hills. It was a convoy of SUVs, minivans, and one very lost-looking golf cart, all bouncing across his front field like they were on some kind of HOA safari tour. Alex bolted upright, grabbed his robe, shoved his feet into boots, and staggered out the front door like a man who'd been personally insulted by the sky. The scene looked like something out of a bizarre suburban apocalypse. Perfectly coiffed strangers were stepping out of their vehicles onto his soil like they were at a neighborhood potluck. Lawn chairs were unfolding. Someone was handing out mini muffins. And there, at the center of it all, was a woman in a royal blue blazer, clipboard in hand, smiling like she'd just discovered America. "Excuse me," Alex shouted, trying to sound authoritative and not like a man yelling in a bathrobe. "What exactly is going on here?" The woman turned, and her smile widened, though her eyes said something entirely less friendly. "Good morning," she beamed. "I'm Margaret Wilson, president of the Evergreen Meadows Homeowners Association. You must be Alex Carter." Alex blinked. "I'm sorry, you're who?" "I understand the confusion," Margaret said, as if he were a toddler mistaking a spoon for a fork. "But this area has been designated as community overflow parking in our HOA bylaws." Alex stared at her, then at the field, then back at her. "This is private land. My land. Not some HOA extension pack," he said, voice sharpening. "There's no agreement. No easement. No permission. What the hell are you talking about?" Margaret flipped through her clipboard. "Well, according to our documentation, this area was used for community events by the previous owner, your grandfather?" Alex felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "My grandfather didn't even let people step on the tomatoes without asking. He sure as hell didn't donate 10 acres to weekend brunch traffic." A few passers-by were now slowing down to watch, their Starbucks iced coffees hovering awkwardly between sips. One guy in golf pants muttered, "We'll be late for tea time," like this whole farm thing was just an inconvenient roadblock. And something in Alex snapped. "You all need to leave," he said, this time with no doubt, no question, no bathrobe wobble in his voice. "You're trespassing. And you've got 15 minutes before I call the sheriff, the news, and every tow truck in a 30-mile radius." Margaret's smile faltered. "That won't be necessary. I'm sure we can discuss this over coffee." "No coffee," Alex said flatly. "No clipboards. No cars. Just go." But as he turned back toward his porch, watching his once serene farm now riddled with tire tracks and muffin crumbs, the pit in his stomach told him one thing loud and clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a declaration of war. And Margaret Wilson? She was just getting started. Margaret Wilson had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were already losing. She stood there in her pristine blue blazer, clipboard hugged to her chest like it was a declaration of divine authority, and delivered her sentences with the calm precision of someone who'd steamrolled a dozen property lines before breakfast. This parking arrangement, she said, gesturing to the field like it was a freshly zoned stadium lot, was approved by the previous HOA board, and frankly, it's been common use for years. I'm sure you can understand how these things work. The community relies on this space. Alex Carter crossed his arms, mud-stained boots sinking into the very soil his grandfather once taught him to till. Yeah, well, the community didn't plant 300 tomato seedlings last month. I did. And I didn't sign up to host your HOA Olympics. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. Evergreen Meadows is home to Mayor Culver, Judge Reynolds, 2 city council members, and the president of the local chamber of commerce. We're a well-connected community. Oh, great, Alex said, dry as drought. Should I call the governor while I'm at it? Before Margaret could reply with some bureaucratic spellcasting, a deep rumble vibrated through the field. A delivery truck, oversized, overconfident, was backing into the rear section of Alex's land. Fast. Hey. 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 Alex sprinted across the field, waving his arms like a human scarecrow in crisis. The truck came to a grinding halt inches from the edge of the tomato rows. The driver leaned out casually. Lady at the entrance said to park back here. Alex turned slowly, every fiber in his neck tense. Margaret was standing 20 feet away, adjusting her sunglasses, looking mildly annoyed at the dust, not the destruction. He didn't yell. He didn't swear. But something in him flipped like a breaker. This wasn't just disrespect. It was personal. This was his land, his dream, his peace. And now his boiling point. Get off my property, he growled, low and deliberate. A small voice cut through the tension like a needle through silk. Daddy, who parked on my garden? Alex turned to see his daughter, Emma, standing barefoot at the porch steps, clutching a half-painted sign that read, Emma's Tomato Castle. Her blonde hair stuck to her cheek from sleep. Her voice was confused, not angry, but her eyes said everything. They stepped on my tomato house. And that did it. Alex swallowed the lump in his throat and crouched to her level. I'm sorry, baby, he whispered. They don't know what they're doing. But I'm gonna make sure they learn. She nodded, like only an 8-year-old with a cardboard tiara and a sacred tomato patch could, and walked back inside, still clutching her sign, like it was a family crest. 15 minutes later, Margaret and her caravan were gone, but the ruts in the soil, the crushed leaves, and the stink of entitlement still lingered. Alex stood in the middle of his battered field, staring at the space where his tomatoes should have been. He pulled out his phone. County Records Office? Yeah, I need to know everything about a piece of land near Evergreen Meadows. Because someone's playing games with my farm, and I don't play nice. The war had officially begun. But this time, Alex wasn't fighting just for land. He was fighting for Emma's Tomato Castle. And no HOA was going to bulldoze that. The County Records Office wasn't exactly built for drama. Fluorescent lights, beige linoleum, and the faint scent of stale coffee didn't scream, life-changing revelation. But for Alex Carter, it might as well have been the Pentagon. He burst through the door like a man on a mission, which, to be fair, he was. Dirt still clung to his jeans, and his boots left a trail of dried mud behind him. The receptionist raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She'd seen worse. Name? She asked, barely glancing up. Alex Carter. I'm looking for any easements, permits, or contracts tied to the old Miller farm just outside Evergreen Meadows. A man with thinning gray hair and thick reading glasses appeared from behind a filing cabinet. Did you say Miller? Alex turned. Yeah, that was my grandfather. You knew him? The man smiled, warm and nostalgic. Frank Jenkins. Been working here 30 years. Your grandfather was a legend around here. Sharp as a tack. Stubborn as a goat. Alex chuckled. Yeah, that sounds about right. Frank motioned him to follow. They walked into a small archive room lined with metal filing cabinets that had probably survived the Cold War. He kept showing up here every time the HOA tried to get clever, Frank said, pulling open a drawer with the ease of a man who had done this dance 1,000 times. They wanted his land bad. He wouldn't budge. Called them clipboard tyrants. I'm starting to understand why, Alex muttered. After 20 minutes of digging, flipping, and muttering under his breath, Frank slid a folder across the table. No agreements. No parking easements. Nothing that gives the HOA a legal inch. Alex exhaled, half in relief, half in exhaustion. But, Frank added, sliding another file forward, there is this. The paper was old, yellowed, creased, and stamped with official ink. At the top, in fading type, Electrical Infrastructure Easement, Pinewood Electric, 1995. Alex raised an eyebrow. What's this? Frank tapped the page. Your grandfather allowed the power company to install a transformer on the north end of his land when they built Evergreen Meadows. He negotiated an annual fee and retained the right to control access. Alex leaned in, scanning the faded diagram. Wait. That transformer, the one behind the tool shed. Frank nodded. That's the one. You're telling me the entire HOA's power runs through my property? Bingo. And the kicker? They can't service or reroute it without your written permission. It's right here in Clause 5. Alex sat back in stunned silence. It was like discovering a secret weapon buried in your backyard, a nondescript green box that had quietly powered hundreds of homes for decades, completely dependent on a handshake deal made by a stubborn old man who'd rather plant beans than file lawsuits. Alex laughed under his breath. He knew. Grandpa always knew. Frank grinned. He played the long game. Didn't like lawyers, but he sure as hell knew how to outsmart them. Alex looked down at the paper again. He wasn't just holding a document, he was holding leverage. Real, legal, electrified leverage. And for the first time since Margaret Wilson and her HOA parade rolled onto his land, he felt something he hadn't in days. Control. Frank, he said, standing up, eyes focused and burning with new energy. Can I get a copy of all of this? Already printing, Frank said with a wink. Alex walked out of the records office with a folder under one arm and a fire in his gut. They thought they could bully him with bylaws and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They had no idea their entire community depended on a rusty box sitting in his field. And he just flipped the switch. By noon, Alex Carter had the documents in hand, the truth on his side, and a phone pressed to his ear like it was a weapon. Pinewood Electric, how may I help you? This is Alex Carter. I own the land under Transformer Station E-245. I need to speak to someone in operations immediately. After a few transfers and some hold music that sounded like it was composed on a fax machine, he finally reached someone who mattered. Mr. Carter, this is Ron Fletcher, head of infrastructure operations. What seems to be the issue? Alex explained the whole HOA circus, the trespassing, the illegal parking lot, and now the possible safety concerns surrounding the transformer they all depended on. Ron's tone shifted instantly. Only Pinewood technicians are authorized near that equipment. If unqualified individuals are accessing it, that's a serious liability. I figured as much.
Can you send someone out?
Absolutely. I'll dispatch a crew Monday morning for inspection. In the meantime, I'll send over our maintenance schedule and authorize you to monitor the site. Thanks, Ron. I might be calling again soon, Alex said grimly. And as it turned out, soon meant exactly 12 minutes later. A knock at the door. Then another, sharper and more smug. Alex opened it to find Margaret Wilson, smug as ever, standing beside a man in a pinstripe suit with teeth too white and a handshake already extended. Jeffrey Williams, the man said. Legal counsel for Evergreen Meadows HOA. Alex didn't shake his hand. Margaret got straight to the point. We're here with a formal parking agreement for you to sign. Just a formality, really. Alex raised an eyebrow. A formality that gives you continued, unrestricted access to my land? Jeffrey smiled like he was on a magazine cover. It's in the best interest of the community. And frankly, Mr. Carter, resisting would put you at odds with some very influential people. Alex stared at him for a long beat. You mean like the ones depending on my land for their electricity? That wiped the grin off both their faces. He stepped out onto the porch, arms folded, voice cool but unshakable. Here's my counteroffer. You've got until 5 p.m. today to remove every vehicle from my property. After that, I'm calling the sheriff, and the press, and every tow company from here to Sacramento. Margaret's jaw tightened. You wouldn't dare. I dare easily when it comes to protecting my daughter's tomato patch, Alex snapped. Jeffrey adjusted his tie, trying to reassert some kind of control. If you escalate, it won't reflect well on you. We have elderly residents, people on medical devices. Any disruption in service. And there it was. The new card they were trying to play. Emotional guilt. Alex sighed. Don't go there. But Margaret did. Just this morning, Mr. Henderson on Elm Street, he uses a breathing machine, experienced a drop in power. We're concerned your actions may have consequences. Alex narrowed his eyes. Your trucks ran over my irrigation lines. Maybe that's what interrupted service. Or maybe it's the unauthorized access to a transformer that, legally, none of you should be within 10 feet of. Jeffrey cleared his throat. We're not here to argue. No, Alex said, stepping back inside and slamming the door. You're here to lose. That afternoon, news of the dispute started spreading. Some neighbors were sympathetic, calling it a clear overreach. Others weren't so sure. I heard he threatened to shut off the power to the whole neighborhood. A woman whispered outside the grocery store. Isn't that dangerous? What about the folks on oxygen? Another murmured. Alex could feel the shift in the air. He wasn't just fighting HOA bylaws now, he was walking a tightrope between legal right and public opinion. But as he stood on his porch, watching a luxury SUV peel out of his field with a chunk of topsoil stuck to its bumper, he knew one thing for certain. They might twist the story. They might stir up fear. But they still had to plug their power into his land. And that meant he still held the cord. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside his property line wasn't new at this point, but the sight of a utility truck parked dangerously close to the transformer box definitely was. Alex Carter stepped out onto his porch with narrowed eyes. The wind kicked up dust along the field as he approached the small green box nestled near the tool shed, Pinewood Electric's transformer. Except something was off. The access panel was slightly ajar. His gut tightened. Before he could take another step, a voice rang out from behind. There he is. That's him. He was messing with it. Alex turned to see Margaret Wilson, marching up the path in full blazer and vengeance mode, pointing a perfectly manicured finger straight at him. Beside her stood a confused-looking utility worker, whose name tag read Dave. Is this true? Dave asked, glancing between them. Sir, were you tampering with the transformer? Alex blinked.
What? No.
I just got out here. That panel was already open. Margaret crossed her arms. You told everyone you'd cut off our power. This is retaliation, plain and simple. Alex laughed dryly. The only thing I cut is grass. And even that's negotiable. Dave crouched near the transformer, examined the panel, and muttered, the lock's definitely been forced. This is bad. Alex took a deep breath. I've got cameras being installed tomorrow. If you want proof, I've been inside with my daughter until 5 minutes ago. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Convenient. Alex didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he turned to Dave. When was your last scheduled maintenance here? Dave checked his tablet. 3 months ago. No visit since. Alex took a slow step forward. Then tell me something, Dave. How did she know the panel was open the second she arrived? Margaret stiffened. I noticed it earlier. When you were trespassing? Alex snapped. Or maybe when someone you sent was breaking the lock? Dave stood up, clearly uncomfortable. I'll have to file a report on this. Please do, Alex said. And I want a copy. Margaret turned on her heel without another word, practically steamrolling the gravel as she returned to her car. But Alex's day wasn't done. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, flipping through folders and nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. The silence was thick, heavy with suspicion, and the gnawing sense that this thing was bigger than just a few angry homeowners and a transformer. His phone buzzed. Elena, his neighbor from 3 doors down, had sent him an email with the subject, "You need to see this." Inside was a PDF thread of internal HOA emails. Scanned documents. Attachments. One in particular made his blood freeze. It was a scanned agreement, dated 2009, with a signature that read, Franklin Miller, his grandfather. The document claimed that Mr. Miller had granted Evergreen Meadows HOA permission to use the eastern field for community purposes, including overflow parking. Alex stared at the signature. It looked right until it didn't. His grandfather's cursive F always looped lower. His R had a crooked tail from an old finger injury. This signature was clean. Too clean. Almost printed. And then he remembered something Elena had told him weeks ago, over the fence. Margaret's husband runs a specialty printing business. Not a Staples. Not a casual copy shop. A professional-grade operation with document-grade printers, scanners, and design software. Alex leaned back, breath shaky. The implications slammed into him like a freight train. They weren't just trespassing. They were forging. They were trying to rewrite his family's history. He pulled out his phone and recorded a video message, just in case. Then he sent everything to his lawyer, Oliver Jenkins, with a simple note. "We've got a forgery. And maybe a felony. Because this wasn't just HOA bullying anymore. This was fraud. This was sabotage. This was a war, and they just fired a federal-level shot." And Alex? He was about to fire back. At exactly 4:17 a.m., Alex Carter's security system lit up like a Christmas tree in panic mode. The motion alerts poured into his phone in rapid fire. East fence line. Movement detected. Multiple contacts. He scrambled out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and bolted outside into the pre-dawn darkness. The air was thick with morning dew, but the beam from his flashlight quickly found what he feared. 3 sections of his newly installed fence were cut clean open. And worse? A steady line of cars, SUVs, sedans, even a pickup with golf clubs in the back, was rolling right through the breach and into his field like they had RSVP'd for brunch on his soil. He rushed forward, filming on his phone, shouting at the drivers. "This is private property. You're trespassing." A woman rolled down her window, waved her phone, and chirped, "We have HOA permission. Check your email if you don't believe me." Alex blinked. "Excuse me?" Sure enough, one by one, each driver flashed him the same message, an email from Margaret Wilson, timestamped 3:12 a.m., stating that the dispute regarding community overflow parking has been resolved with Mr. Carter's compliance. It was a bald-faced lie, typed in HOA speak and dressed in passive-aggressive politeness. 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights spinning but sirens off. Officer Reynolds stepped out, weary-eyed, coffee in hand. Alex showed him the video footage, the broken fence, the unauthorized email. Reynolds glanced at the phone, then at the cars, then back at Alex. "Look," he said with a sigh, "they've got written permission from the HOA. You've got your deed. This is quickly becoming a civil dispute, not criminal trespassing. If it were up to me, I'd tow every last car off this land. But legally, my hands are tied." "Someone cut my fence," Alex snapped. "That's criminal mischief." Reynolds looked sympathetic. "Unless you have a clear video of who did it, it's your word against theirs. File a report. Take it to court." And just like that, the law stepped aside. Back in the house, the silence was almost too much. The only sound was the occasional ping from Alex's inbox, neighbors forwarding the same fake authorization email. He closed the laptop and slumped at the table, head in his hands.
"Dad."
He turned. Emma stood at the doorway in her fuzzy pajamas, holding what was left of her handmade tomato garden sign. The corner was splintered. Mud streaked across the paint. "They ran over the castle," she whispered. Tears welled in her big brown eyes. "I worked so hard on it." Alex walked over and knelt beside her. He wiped her cheek with his sleeve and pulled her into a hug. She buried her face into his chest, her tiny body shaking. In that moment, something shifted in him. Not just anger or frustration, but a resolve carved from the oldest kind of strength there is. The need to protect what's yours. Not just the soil, not just the deed, but the memory of a grandfather who built a legacy. And the hope in the eyes of an 8-year-old girl who believed her tomato castle was magic. He stood up, heart pounding. "I'm calling Oliver." By noon, Alex was on the phone with Oliver Jenkins, a sharp-tongued, no-nonsense attorney who had taken on more than a few corrupt HOAs in his time. They forged an agreement, entered my land at dawn, and used fake authorization to convince law enforcement this is legit, Alex said. "I need an injunction."
Now.
Oliver didn't hesitate. "We'll file for an emergency hearing first thing in the morning. But brace yourself. These people don't fight fair." "I don't care," Alex said, gripping the phone. "They want to play dirty?
Fine.
I'll play legal." And as he hung up, he looked back at Emma's broken sign on the floor, then out toward the fields where cars still dotted the landscape. They'd messed with the wrong dad. And tomorrow, they'd find out what happens when a farmer starts fighting like a father. The Evergreen Meadows Community Center had never seen this many cars outside on a weekday evening. They filled every inch of pavement, spilled into the neighborhood streets, and, ironically, not one of them was parked on Alex Carter's field. That detail wasn't lost on him. Inside, the meeting hall buzzed with nervous chatter. Folding chairs creaked. HOA board members sat stiffly at the front like royalty awaiting judgment. Margaret Wilson stood at the podium, gesturing grandly to a projected image behind her, a glossy rendering of future community expansion, which, shockingly, included a paved parking lot right where Alex's tomato plants used to live. Alex stood at the back, folder in hand, watching it all like a man preparing to drop a grenade into a tea party. "And so," Margaret said, voice silky and sharp, "with the community's best interests in mind, we have moved forward with long-overdue plans to reclaim and organize what was, historically, shared property." "Shared?" Alex stepped forward. "You mean stolen?" The room turned. Margaret blinked. "Mr. Carter, how lovely of you to finally join us." "I'm glad I did," he said, walking to the front and plugging his laptop into the projector. "Because I think it's time everyone saw the whole picture." He clicked. Slide 1. A scanned property deed. Alex's name. His grandfather's signature. Clear boundary lines. No mention of any HOA. Slide 2. A forged document, recently uncovered, claiming Alex's grandfather had granted perpetual parking access. Date. 6 months ago. The problem? His grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier. Gasps echoed across the room. Slide 3. HOA email threads, leaked by Elena. Subject lines like, "Escalate until he gives in. Make him fold, legally or socially." Elena stood up from the crowd, voice firm. "I confirm everything. I'm on the email list. Margaret has lied to this community." The air cracked like glass. And then the final slide. Alex stepped aside to reveal a photo of a transformer box tucked behind his barn. The caption read, "This is where your power comes from." "I didn't want to bring this up," Alex said, voice calm, "but this community's entire power grid runs through my land. I have the easement, the maintenance rights, the legal control." The silence was deafening. "I'm not here to threaten anyone," he added. "But if you continue to ignore my rights, trample my farm, and spread lies, then next week, I'm revoking all non-essential maintenance access. And when that box fails in July heat, that's on you." Someone in the back stood up. "Is this true?" Alex nodded. "Confirmed by Pinewood Electric. I have the emails." Margaret's smile had evaporated. Her eyes burned. Then her phone buzzed. She turned away slightly and whispered into the receiver, "Do it now." 3 seconds later, the lights went out. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed. Emergency lights flickered on, casting jagged shadows across the room. "What the hell?" someone shouted. Margaret's voice cut through the dark, shrill and triumphant.
"See?
This is what happens when one man holds power hostage." But before the crowd could erupt, Alex's phone lit up. Incoming call, Pinewood Electric. He answered on speaker. Mr. Carter, we just caught someone tampering with transformer E245. It was a woman in a blue blazer. Our cameras caught everything. Police are en route. A beat of silence. Then all eyes turned to Margaret. Her face drained of color. He's lying, she shouted. But phones were already up, recording. Whispers exploded into chaos. You tried to cut the power yourself? You put us all at risk? You framed him. And, in that moment, the room transformed. Not just from light to dark, but from power to justice. Margaret bolted for the door. But Officer Reynolds was already there. Sit down, ma'am, he said. We need to talk. Alex exhaled, chest pounding, sweat dampening his collar. He hadn't needed to cut the power. Margaret had done it for him. And now, everyone had finally seen the truth, in the dark. Panic in a well-lit room is one thing. Panic in the dark, with 60 angry neighbors, one broken power grid, and a woman screaming about conspiracy, is a whole different flavor of chaos. The moment the lights blinked out at the Evergreen Meadows community meeting, the mood flipped like a switch. Literally. Someone shrieked. Chairs scraped. A table tipped over with a crash. Dozens of cell phone flashlights flicked on like fireflies trapped in a storm. Margaret Wilson stood at the front of the room, her face half illuminated by the flicker of a backup light. Her voice, shrill and shaking, tried to control the narrative. This is what I warned you about. This man, this farmer, has endangered us all. But the faces in the crowd weren't buying it anymore. A few were whispering. Some were filming. And one elderly man muttered, I think she's finally lost it. Then, Alex's phone lit up. Unknown number glowed on the screen. He answered. This is Alex Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Pinewood Electric. Our security cameras just captured footage of a woman in a blue blazer tampering with transformer E245 on your property. Police have already been notified. Officers should arrive any minute. Alex put the call on speaker. Every word hung in the air like thunder. Wait, what did he just say? Did she cut the power herself? Phones turned. Flashlights pivoted. All toward Margaret, now pale and motionless. She stumbled back a step. He's lying. He's manipulating all of you. This is all part of his plan to seize power. Lady, someone near the front said dryly, you already gave it to him when you fried the neighborhood. Margaret's eyes darted to the exit. Then to her lawyer, Jeffrey Williams, who was trying to quietly slip out the side door, head low and tie askew. Stop that man, someone yelled. Two residents near the door blocked his path, phones filming. Officer Reynolds entered moments later, flashlight raised, badge gleaming. Jeffrey Williams, the officer said, I need you to come with me. You've been named in a criminal complaint involving document forgery and conspiracy. Jeffrey froze like a bad actor in a school play. Margaret turned to bolt. But Alex was already moving, calm, composed, folder still under his arm. Don't bother. I sent the news everything. They'll be here in 5. She spun toward him, wild-eyed. You what? I called the press 2 hours ago, Alex said. Told them to bring cameras and record the downfall of HOA tyranny. Looks like they picked the right day. As if on cue, sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights lit the windows in pulses. Gasps spread like wildfire. The door burst open. 2 more officers entered with purpose. One gestured toward Margaret. Hands where we can see them, ma'am. You can't do this, she screamed, pulling away. I am the community. But no one moved to defend her. Not anymore. Instead, the residents, once silent, once obedient, filmed her. They whispered words like embezzlement, fraud, abuse of power. Someone started chanting, "Justice for the farm." Outside, the first news van rolled up. A reporter in heels hopped out with a mic in hand, cameraman trailing. Alex stood at the top of the community center steps, watching as Margaret was cuffed and led away, her blazer now dirted, her legacy unraveling on live TV. The reporter turned to Alex. Sir, Are you the farmer involved in this HOA incident? He nodded. I'm Alex Carter. They tried to steal my land. But turns out, my land powered their homes. She blinked. Wait, literally? Literally. The camera zoomed in. And just like that, the story was out. Farmer outsmarts HOA, catches president sabotaging power grid. Within hours, the internet did what it does best. Turned a scandal into a sensation. Alex's story went viral. The hashtags followed. HOA hell. Farmers fight back. Tomato justice. For the first time since this battle began, Alex didn't feel cornered. He felt heard. And the whole country was finally listening. It was strange how quiet the neighborhood had become. For weeks, Evergreen Meadows had been buzzing with tension, clipboards waving like swords, HOA emails flying like arrows. But now, with Margaret Wilson and Jeffrey Williams officially indicted on charges of forgery, trespassing, and attempted sabotage, the air had changed. The signs were subtle. No more SUVs prowling near the Carter property line. No more early morning mower inspections. No more HOA courtesy visits with veiled threats and fake smiles. Just birds, wind, and a silence that sounded suspiciously like peace. Alex Carter stood near the edge of his field, looking out at the flattened rows where tomato plants once proudly grew. The soil was scarred, tired, but not broken. Behind him, voices approached. Alex, a warm voice called out. He turned to see Thomas Mitchell, the newly elected HOA president, walking toward him with a small group of neighbors. Thomas, a retired firefighter with a soft voice and a firmer moral compass, had won the emergency election by a landslide after Margaret's spectacular fall from grace. Didn't expect a parade, Alex said, brushing dirt from his hands. Thomas offered a handshake. We didn't come to parade. We came to make things right. He held up a clipboard. Ironic, considering the history, but this one didn't come with bylaws or ultimatums. Just a list of volunteers. Neighbors. Some of us thought it was time we stopped acting like an HOA and started acting like a community. Alex hesitated. He looked past Thomas at the faces behind him, people who had once silently watched as his field was invaded. People who had whispered about fines and uncooperative farmers. And yet here they were, holding tools, carrying seed packets. One woman even had a watering can shaped like a duck. And at the center of them all was Emma, wearing a sun hat 3 sizes too big, holding a new hand-painted sign that read in big red letters. Tomato Victory Garden Est. By the people. Alex's throat tightened. He cleared it. You all really want to do this? Thomas smiled. We figured it's time we built something together instead of tearing things apart. Alex looked at his daughter, beaming as she pointed to where the castle rose used to be. Daddy, can we plant the cherry tomatoes over there? That's the sweet side. He laughed, the kind that comes from a place deep in the chest, half healing, half disbelief. Yeah, baby. The sweet side's a good place to start. Over the next few hours, the field came alive again. Kids shoveled compost like it was treasure. Retirees planted tomatoes with the same precision they once used on taxes. Elena handed out lemonade and bug spray. Thomas got sunburned. The duck watering can made several appearances. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Neighbors swapped stories over seedlings. Someone brought a speaker and played Johnny Cash. And Emma proudly gave a tour of the rows like she was curator of a very leafy museum. By sunset, the garden had taken shape, rows reborn, roots claiming ground. And in the middle of it all, Alex stood in quiet awe. He thought of his grandfather, of the easement, the foresight, the legacy he'd unknowingly protected, of how a simple field had become a battlefield. And now, a bridge. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light over fresh green leaves, Thomas clapped a hand on Alex's shoulder. Funny how fences can divide people, or bring them together, he said. Alex nodded. Depends on who's holding the hammer. The 2 men looked out at the new garden. Children ran between the rows. Emma danced with dirt on her cheeks. The war was over. And in its place stood something far better than victory. Belonging. The hammer echoed through the field, steady, deliberate, final. Alex Carter sunk the last post into the soil, wiped the sweat from his brow, and stepped back to admire the new fence, 12 solid panels of treated oak, reinforced with steel wire, stretching clean along the eastern edge of his land. It wasn't just a fence. It was a boundary in wood and will. A line that said, "This is where peace begins and where overreach ends." Attached to the main gate was a freshly bolted aluminum sign. Black lettering on clean white background. Simple, firm, unapologetic. Private property, not affiliated with HOA. Below it, a smaller, more colorful addition fluttered in the breeze, painted on reclaimed wood, misspelled slightly, and decorated with glittery sunflowers. "Welcome to Tomato Land, Emma's Garden Yellowheart." Alex smiled, tracing the painted letters with his finger. "Pretty good sign, huh?" A small voice chirped beside him. He looked down. Emma stood with hands on her hips, face smeared with strawberry jam and pride. Her pigtails bounced as she beamed. "It's perfect," he said. "And it's ours." That afternoon, with the fence standing tall and the garden back in bloom, Alex sat on the old porch swing his grandfather had built decades ago. The same swing where he once drank lemonade as a boy. The same swing where he'd watch sunsets with his daughter, unknowingly preparing to become the kind of man who could fight for something bigger than comfort. He reached into the storage trunk beneath the swing and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. The corners were cracked, the pages lined in his grandfather's neat handwriting. The Miller family ledger. It wasn't filled with stock tips or estate plans. It was filled with small things: planting dates, crop rotations, notes on which weeds were most stubborn, which neighbors had good hearts, and which ones to watch with both eyes open. At the very back, there was a blank page. Until now. Alex pulled a pen from his shirt pocket, stared out at the field, at the cameras now posted in the trees, at the new signs, at the rows of green bursting from soil that had once been flattened by SUV tires, and began to write. "You were right, Gramp. The land's only yours if you're willing to defend it. I didn't plan on fighting a war, but I fought one anyway. And I kept the line. I kept the field. I kept the promise." He signed the page, closed the book, and set it gently beside him. Weeks passed. The media buzz faded. The HOA restructured. Lawsuits were filed. Charges stuck. And Evergreen Meadows quietly transformed. People stopped whispering and started waving again. Elena brought peach cobbler every Sunday. Thomas dropped off extra mulch. Even the old guy with the oxygen tank sent over tomato cages with a post-it. "Thanks for the lights, neighbor." And Emma? Emma ruled her garden like a queen, one muddy rain boot at a time. She gave names to every tomato plant, hosted garden tours for the local kids, created a chalk-drawn border patrol line where HOA officials were absolutely not allowed without cookies. One morning, as Alex sipped coffee on the porch, Emma ran up holding a stick like a sword.
"Daddy."
"What makes someone a good neighbor?" He thought for a moment. "Two things," he said, smiling. "A good fence. And even better respect." She nodded like it was the most profound thing she'd ever heard. And maybe it was. Because in the end, it wasn't just about tomatoes or power lines or forged papers. It was about boundaries, not just where they're drawn in dirt, but how they're honored in hearts. And as the sun rose over Tomato Land and the new fence cast a long, proud shadow across the field, Alex Carter knew one thing for sure. Good fences really do make good neighbors. But only when they come with something stronger. Mutual respect.